Hey everyone, my name's Joe.
And I'm Mike.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? The podcast. And this week we'll be reviewing The Lobster.
Get the butter out, we're reviewing The Lobster.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? Featuring two guys getting fingered and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And thank you to Kevin Pettyjean on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and every other social media we have. He was very insistent on us using this synonym.
He was.
So we used it.
He attacked us on all fronts.
I'm assuming by fingered he means the verb of our podcast and just reviewing movies, just fingering movies.
Right. And
yes, just reviewing movies and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
and not the sexual act that only Kevin would suggest. All right.
While we're talking about Kevin,
right, yeah,
we had Kevin on last week's episode, and wow. Wow.
Well, the thing is, I feel like we keep saying wow, and not a lot of people could hear it. I mean, I think people could hear it in my voice.
Yeah.
That I was...
I don't know, I can hear it in my voice towards the end of that, but if you didn't listen to last week's episode, we decided to switch things up. We were doing another Skype episode with Kevin, and Kevin refused to drink anything but tequila, so we thought, why don't we make it fun, and we'll do a shot of tequila every 15 minutes at the sound of a doomsday alarm.
Because we're reviewing X-Men Apocalypse.
Yeah, and I'd actually originally suggested every 10 minutes, and oh my god, thank God we didn't do that. Because I think I thought that it was going to be like an hour review, maybe an hour and a half at most. Usually our reviews like top off around an hour and a half.
An hour and a half at most, just 9 shots.
Yeah.
In an hour and a half.
Well, no, then you guys talked me down to every 15 minutes, and I was like, all right, 6 shots in an hour and a half. Like, that's good.
Right.
But we ended up recording for 2 hours, so it was 8 shots in 2 hours, and I was recording on an empty stomach, so that's probably the most drunk I've been in a How Many Fingers episode.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was...
Like, we keep raising the bar, and it's not good. Or lowering the bar, maybe.
That's what I said. It's like we do 30 pretty clean-cut episodes. Not really, but then we just start like doing like weird shit on this podcast. I feel like we can just experiment now.
We're just trying to spice stuff up now. We're in our college years. We're experimenting. But yeah, listen to that episode if you haven't, because that's still a very fun episode.
It is. And
that was a good one.
Something we didn't address as much as we did in the one prior to that, in the nice guys. I always want to call it the new guys. Hey, we're the new guys. Stop roughing our hair up. Where was I going with this? Oh, we didn't talk about In Development as much, which, if you're not familiar, is the film that Michael directed and I produced. And right now, it is a submission to the Road Reel or My Road Reel
Road Reel,
film competition of 2016. And Mike, do you want to tell them about
the film? Yeah. The film is about a photographer experiencing vivid flashbacks to a past relationship through his camera. Mm-hmm. Like Joe said, I wrote and directed it, and I edited it.
Oh, you edited it?
And then Joe was the producer, and he served some wardrobe functions, and he also directed the behind the scenes. So if you do go watch that our film on My Road Reel, you can also watch the behind the scenes, which is pretty cool to see our faces and whatnot.
You can put a face to the voice.
Face to the voices, yes, which you may not want to do.
And you'll be like, oh, good thing they do a podcast.
They got a face for radio. And then my good friend Evan Vinjamori composed an original soundtrack for it on the piano. And he's also got a side project, Moving Through Open Space. So if you search for that on Spotify, the soundtrack is now up on Spotify, so you can listen to that. So that's pretty cool.
Oh, was it up on there?
But most importantly, we need your votes. So the link we've posted it on all of our social media. We'll probably post it again, but the link is pretty easy to read. www.rode.com. That's RODE.com/myroadreel, reel as in REEL, /watch/entry/2268. So if you go there, right below the video player, there's a button that says vote, and you click that and you log in with Facebook, Google Plus, or a Rode.com account, and your vote gets counted, and hopefully we win.
Yeah, and it wasn't until today that we we realized that there's a button where you can see who has the most votes, and we're all the way back on the 8th page.
Which I think it put us at like 120.
Considering there's like well over 1,000 submissions.
1,223
it's not that far back,
exact.
But we definitely need a push.
I think as of today, as we're recording this now, I think we're almost in the top 100. So we may have pushed through that by the time you're listening to this, hopefully even further. And then with your help, hopefully even further than that. So we would really appreciate some votes if you guys have the time. It takes like 2 seconds. Just click the link that we'll have everywhere and go vote. And watch it if you haven't yet, obviously. And let us know what you think in fingers form. How many fingers would you give our movie?
Definitely. All right.
So this week we're drinking more basic beer. I'm surprised we haven't drank yet already.
Yeah, really.
Pabst Blue Ribbon. Hipster beer for a hipster movie.
I have the 24 fluid ounce can.
Ooh, tall boy.
I'm also on pretty strong antibiotics, so I'm sure we'll get some colorful commentary by the end.
We're spicing it up. Last week was tequila shots. This week is antibiotics and alcohol. Oh, God. We are just a lesson on things you should not do at home. We're going to need a please do not try this at home disclaimer at the beginning of every episode. I don't really know how to review Pabst Blue Ribbon.
That's just a regular old
it's just
beer,
there.
really.
Yeah, just a light Pilsner. Slightly higher alcohol content, more bang for your buck. We used to drink it a decent amount in college.
Definitely. It leaves like a real rank taste in your mouth after a while, though. You wouldn't expect it when you first start drinking it, but after a while you're like, ooh.
If you've ever actually had it on tap, it's not bad on tap. I've had it at a few like cheap bars on tap, and
I might have. I don't know.
Definitely better than out of can.
Yeah. All right.
But that's the beer.
That is the beer. And is it my turn to do the IMDb description?
Sure.
Okay then. We're a very structured podcast around here. So the IMDb description is: in a dystopian near future, single people, according to the laws of the city, in caps, are taken to the hotel, in caps, where they are obliged to find a romantic partner in 45 days, or are transformed into beasts and sent off into the woods. Into beasts.
Hotel, motel, holiday.
Not animals. And everything.
That's a wordy description. IMDb, you were going strong for a while, but I think we've pulled ahead with our description of In Development.
Yeah.
And this description of the Lobster.
Yeah.
Do you have Joe notes, or is it just Mike notes this week? Or do we have both?
I felt like we were rotating, so I feel like it's just going to be some Mike notes.
Mike notes, all right. I do have Mike's notes. I just couldn't remember if you did Joe notes as well.
I will,
like we said, structured.
Yeah, and I will chime in about Dogtooth because that's like in my top 20 films of all time.
Really? I didn't know you had seen that one yet.
Yeah, it's a good.
It's a good. All right, anyway, Mike notes. The Lobster is directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, who, if you couldn't tell by that name, is a Greek director who previously wrote and directed Canetta, Dogtooth, and Alps, and also directed Venice 70, Venice 70: Future Reloaded, which is a documentary. I didn't bother looking into what that's about. But The Lobster is his first English language film. Previously, they were in Greek and filmed in Greece. Mm-hmm. And Dogtooth was nominated for an Oscar in 2011 for Best Foreign Language Film. Did not win, though. I don't know if you wanted to chime in about that now. I never saw that. What is that about?
Oh, it is quite the film. It's not for everybody. Just like this film is not so much for everybody. You can tell like The Lobster's a little bit more of like an Americanized version of like a more European film.
Mm-hmm.
But I know, the Dogtooth. I think it won the like something like Prix un certain regard or whatever at the 2009 Cannes Film Festival, and I think that's when they first started accepting his work. I feel like just like the guy, who directed Drive, I forget what his name exactly is, or like Lars von Trier or something. Once they take like one really good film of yours at Cannes, they kind of just start taking them all. Like that's why I was like, was The Lobster like really that good to be?
Did they take Lars von Trier's movies? I feel like nobody takes his movies.
Oh, Cannes is the only place that takes
one that appreciates those.
Even after he had a Q&A, and he was like, he kind of teetered on Nazi sympathizing.
Oh, that's right.
If you have a minute to look that up on YouTube. Talk about like foot in mouth.
He's a character, man.
And he's completely shameless about it too. He's just he's crazy.
I was listening to an interview with Kirsten Dunst. I think she was on Conan actually, right before or around when Melancholia came out, and she was talking about how much she liked working with him because he just keeps the set loose. Like if he feels like people are getting like too uptight, he'll literally just strip naked and run around the set and be like, "Come on, guys! Like,
yeah,
just chill out."
And I think he's gained some sort of reputation from behavior like that, where certain female actresses don't want to work with him after that. I remember she like jumped out of her chair kind of during that Q&A. She's like, "Don't say that." And he was like, "I'm sorry." He's like, "I understand Hitler. I feel bad."
Give him a break.
I feel like that's especially not a good thing to say in Europe.
No.
But anyway, Dogtooth, it's a trip. You kind of have to just see it for yourself.
Is it absurd? Is it absurdist? Like, are all of his movies absurdist typically, or?
Yes, there's sort of kind of all these absurdist quote unquote comedies. Even though I do not think Dogtooth was not a comedy to me. It's essentially about a father, and there's like a mom there too, but it's kind of like a room scenario, except he has like these adult children who don't know anything beyond like this estate that they live on, and it's sort of like a wealthy family. The dad owns a factory, and he says, "You guys can go out into the outside world. The only way I can take you out there is via car. The only way you can get out there is car, and but the only time that I'll let you go out there, or when you're ready, or when all like children are ready, is when you lose your dog tooth," which is obviously a fictitious thing. And it just gets very bizarre. He like hires a girl from his factory to, satisfy his. They're all like he essentially has adult children too. They're 20 something. And, he takes a woman from, like, his factory that he works at to satisfy his adult son's, like, libido. And, and when she's
best dad ever.
Right. And when she's out of the picture, he's like, "Choose one of your sisters." And and it's maybe one of the most absurd things. He's a fucking visionary when like, in that film. It's just, like, it's kind of like people are like, "Oh, it's kind of like, like it's kind of like homeschooling, or it's kind of like the way that we like treat our children, except it's like an absurdist comedy." I didn't really take it as either of those, but he's very like specifically political on certain social points, but he's also like incredibly organic and just playful. But like the impact of every film that he has is pretty sharp. Or at least, again, this is just Dogtooth I'm talking about, and I remember people fucking. Like film reviewers still write at length about that film, trying to like be like, "No, it was about this," and people were really like, he's definitely like the next Lars von Trier, or who was that guy that did like Amour or like Funny Games? Michael Haneke or something.
It sounds familiar.
I don't know. But the thing is, he's not like as desperate to shock as Lars, and doesn't have that.
Lars
like,
has a background in art porn, so
yeah, and he doesn't feel like as entitled as the guy who did whatever. But like, before this film, I would definitely describe Yorgos as like kind of a combination of like Lars von Trier and Michael Haneke's Funny Games, which was also supposed to be a comedy, and I do. Yeah. It's for those of you who don't know, it's just
they have a dark sense of humor over in Europe.
It's essentially about man, woman, and child. Who,
did you guys have to deal with 2 world wars or something?
It's about like a father, mother, small child who just go to their shore house or whatever to just go on like a little vacation, and then 2 kids wander in off the croquet course and, I don't know, play funny games with them, aka like torture them until they're all dead over the course of 24 hours. Yeah. It's very disturbing. But yeah, that's my whole spiel on him. I think he's pretty genius, and I'll definitely draw. And I didn't know that this was him until like it popped up on the screen, and I was like, shit. Like it's like really? I feel like it's gonna be that sort of Green Room, Blue Ruin all over again, where I don't know. We'll talk about it.
All right, I'm going to continue the mic notes.
Yeah, go for it.
Very briefly. It's written by Yorgos Lanthimos as well, and Efthymis Philippou, however you say that, another Greek writer. To my understanding, most of the crew was Greek, although obviously the cast is not exclusively Greek. But Efthymis, he also worked on Dogtooth and Alps as a writer, as well as Elle and Chevalier, which I think came out in 2015. That would be his most recent. The film stars Colin Farrell, Rachel Weisz, John C. Reilly, Léa Seydoux, Ben Whishaw, Ariana Labed, and Jessica Barden. Just an interesting note, Léa Seydoux, I can't pronounce some of these 4 names.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Ben Whishaw were both in Spectre, which was the
Spectre. I hardly know her.
Which, if you're a fan of the podcast, that was the first film we reviewed. So it was kind of cool to see them together again. The Lobster was selected to compete for the Palme d'Or at the 2015 Cannes Film Festival, and it won the jury prize. And it was shown in the special presentations section of the 2015 Toronto International Film Festival. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has a score of 90% based on reviews from 175 critics with an average score of 7.6 out of 10. Pretty good. The site's critical consensus reads, "As strange as it is thrillingly ambitious, The Lobster is definitely an acquired taste, but for viewers with the fortitude to crack through Yorgos Lanthimos' offbeat sensibilities, it should prove a savory cinematic treat." Which is pretty accurate. It was released by A24 in the US, with a budget of 4 million euros, which translates or converts to about $4.5 million. And so far it's grossed 13.5 million worldwide, so did pretty well. And I would say it's got pretty good distribution and advertisement, because I feel like I've seen trailers for this everywhere. A lot on Facebook. I feel like Facebook has gotten really good at like placing some of these indie movies with us.
Yeah.
On Facebook, and just word of mouth. I feel like I heard from a lot of like certain indie hipster film fans about The Lobster. It definitely has a certain hype about it that's been building.
Yo. But let's rap about a qualm that I have, and that this film was released last Monday, I believe the 13th, and it was gone by the 15th to make room for Finding Dory. It had a 3-day release. And
I think it actually, the limited release was March 13th. Hold on, I had that up somewhere.
Just wide release, though. Yeah.
May 13th. So it was out for about a month. Maybe not in a lot of theaters.
I mean, like in New York
but...
City and, LA maybe, but
yeah.
Or actually, would that even be like a European release?
I'm sure there was a ton of European releases, because I think in the USA it only grossed about $6.25 million, maybe.
Right. I feel like nobody's
13.5 worldwide. So,
but I don't know even if we want to talk about this, but this is a huge problem because, and we might still review it, but this was a huge problem because I was very adamant. I know me and Mike are huge fans of The Lonely Island, and we really wanted to review Pop Star. And again, it had like a 2-week window in theaters. What the fuck what's that about?
Yeah, I don't know.
It seems like they put so much advertising and everything into that, and then it's just like it's cut short. I don't know.
I wonder if their distribution deals had some kind of like caveat or like a condition that had to be met in order to extend it for a certain amount of weeks or something.
Right.
I guess just in general, theaters are probably, looking at sales. I would have thought that would have done better though. I guess
Same.
Lonely Island, it has been a while. They're not entirely relevant. They were on SNL to promote this.
Yeah, they had Judd Apatow behind it. It seemed like a pretty expensive production. I don't know. I still want to review it. Maybe we'll review it. We really have to see, just because...
When it's on demand.
Right, yeah. Or find it online.
On Netflix.
Which we definitely didn't do with this one.
We definitely saw it in theaters.
The 3 days it was available.
I have a quote from Bomb Magazine. Never heard of it before, but they did an interview with Yorgos. It had a quote that I particularly liked, and he said, "This was my first film made under different conditions, and that was difficult for me. I made all my previous films in Greece with just a few friends trying to put some money together, our own money, and most of them didn't get paid or only got paid very little. We just had the absolutely necessary stuff. We were asking for favors, shooting in friends' houses, borrowing equipment, props, clothes, that kind of situation." Which I think, in light of the fact that Dogtooth was nominated for an Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, that's pretty cool that, like,
oh, definitely,
he really was just like, bare bones guerrilla indie filmmaking before this. Like, the stuff that we do where we're like, oh man, like, who has a house that has a room that looks like that for this one scene? Or,
right.
Can you borrow this stuff from your work, this equipment that we need? And
right.
Can you, grab us scrubs from your job or something like that? Like, I don't know. It's cool to see people who are finding success making films in that way. So I thought that was a cool quote.
And especially for Dogtooth, which I think...
That gives me hope.
Like that like ripped the film world open, like that film. I think it was I don't know. Maybe it was a little too weird for the Oscars, but I feel like it should have been like up for maybe Best Picture that year. Like, like Amour was up for Best Picture, and that wasn't that was a foreign language film. Maybe they were just slowly coming around to it, or he was a completely unknown director too at the time, where they know Michael Haneke or whatever last name I'm making up for him.
He's not that old either, Yorgos. I think he's 42. I mean, he's not that young either.
Right.
I guess that's a decent age to really start finding your success. So hopefully this brings him more success. But that's the conclusion of the Mike Notes. On to the film.
On to the film. All right.
So the film opens with a woman getting out of her car and shooting a donkey in the face.
And then title card, The Lobster.
Title card.
We never know why. I didn't really...
A reviewer I read had a theory that it was just kind of sort of like not really a theory, but I think I agree with this too. It's kind of just establishing the world and the relationship between animals and humans, where it's like you can probably theorize that donkey was like a divorced husband, right, of this lady, or who maybe like a cheating husband that she divorced and he couldn't find someone else, so he turned into a donkey, and then she finds him and just shoots him in the face, or maybe if it's not even the right donkey that she ends up shooting.
Right, yeah. Because there is, like, you can't tell. There's, like, a story later on about the man with the limp who says his mother, who was in a very similar situation to that theory, you know, or no, his
No,
father found a
got
new
turned into a
woman,
wolf.
and his
mother
mother
got turned
was
into a
sent to the
wolf.
hotel. She was turned into a wolf. One day he just wanted a hug from his mom, and he
She tore his leg up.
yeah, and he dropped into the wolf. I don't know, what did they call it?
Den, hovel.
Yeah, and then the gorilla picked up the toddler, and the Jisoo shot him
And the
in
alligator.
closement. Yeah. Oh, and then the
Disney.
alligators too at Disney World. But what a heartbreaking story. And he couldn't tell which one was his mom because all the wolves attacked him but two. And he's like, well, at least one of those two is my mom. Which is even more heartbreaking because it's like one. It wasn't just one. It was like, well, it's
Two,
one of
he
those two.
doesn't even know. Yeah.
And it sucks that you don't know which one is. Yeah. So
And then after the title card, I really like the scene after that. It's pretty much just like a single shot of Colin Farrell kind of from behind him, assumedly from his wife or soon-to-be ex-wife's viewpoint looking at him. And you can kind of assume she's just told him she's going to be with another man, and he's kind of just sitting there sobbing and crying. You can see a dog in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And like the big question that he asks is he short-sighted?
yeah, and then he goes, does he wear contacts or glasses? And she's like, glasses. And I'll come back to this because I have a huge qualm with like this whole short-sighted thing.
Yeah, it gets strange. Then after that, he's dropped off at the hotel in all caps.
Right,
Which
he's essentially like almost immediately after that, and who knows if there's a lapse in time, but he's essentially put into like one of those like those like wagons that police officers put like a bunch of people into. He's essentially arrested because he's now single and he's taken to the hotel.
And it's kind of like a socialized or like a social program almost, like a nursing home for single people.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of like the description said, the residents are given 45 days to find a mate with a matching defining feature, such as limping, nosebleeds, lisps, or in his case, he's short-sighted, so he's always looking for someone that's short-sighted as well. And if they fail to find a mate, they're turned into an animal of their choice and released into the wild, also in all caps.
Mm-hmm.
Which, just a wild premise from the start.
It is.
I feel like if I didn't exactly know what the movie was about, like if I hadn't, read descriptions before it started, I would be very confused at the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like this has got to be a horrible movie to go into blind.
Right, yeah. And what you said before about like the opening shot where it's a long shot on him, you never see like his wife or anything. They do the same thing in this next scene where he's kind of checking into this hotel, and it's like it's only on Colin Farrell for like a very, very long time, and I almost dislike that at the end of this scene they finally just show who's behind the desk. And it's not really like this person looks like strange or anything. It's just like a normal looking
like
African American woman
at that point.
And I was just kind of like, oh, well then why would you open it up to a wide shot? Like, I like that it's very personal and like close in the beginning. They open it up to a wide shot. It was just kind of strange to me. Weird choice.
Yeah, and I did like that scene though, like especially the part she's kind of like asking, how long were you married, or how long did your previous relationship ask? And he's like, 12 years. And she's like, do you know exactly how long it lasted? And he says 11 years and 1 month. Like,
right, yeah.
He rounded up like 11 whole months. And then she's like, do you want to be listed as a heterosexual or a homosexual? Mm-hmm. And he's like, I had a bi experience in college.
That one, I wasn't crazy about how long that draws on, and I almost feel like that was just some sort of trailer line that they put in. Like, especially because, like, it's, like, either, like, kind of looking for those, like social justice warrior points, or it's just kind of, like, that bad taste, like, European
I think
humor.
it was more, like, because the whole film, to me, to sort of jump a little bit into the overall, it's kind of like mocking of like bureaucratic aristocratic society, or like socialized in terms of socialism society, you know, where everything is government controlled and whatnot, and like, you're literally like checking in about these facts, like very personal facts about your life, like.
Right.
You know, he can't even like list himself as bisexual. Like they're like, oh, that's actually not an option. You have to decide right now. Do you want to be listed as heterosexual or homosexual? Like it's just kind of like filling out a form for like the most like, you know, irrelevant and arbitrary things about your life.
Yeah.
And I think it's also serving to establish kind of the whole movie has this very like dry delivery of all the lines to an absurd degree. And it's almost like a Wes Anderson movie in that way, but even like drier. And it's funny at some parts, like in this scene, it's funny, you know, because of what's being said. You know, she's got this very dry tone when she's like, you know, do you want to be listed as a heterosexual or homosexual? Like, and then, you know, he's very like just matter of fact when he's like, oh, I had a homosexual experience in college. Is there a bisexual option? Like it's funny in parts like that. But then there's other times where it doesn't really make sense in the movie, and they kind of they keep that dry, extremely dry and emotionless delivery, I think, too much in the movie and too long.
And it also, what they're doing is world building too. And at first I was kind of like, okay, well, like, yeah, it's kind of obvious that it's maybe set in the future. It's obviously... it's either that or a different reality. So, you know, we're kind of being thrown all of these rules. Like he's single, he's kind of being carted off by the police, and he's being put into this program. And I thought like maybe the the dialect or sort of social habits are a little different. Where like at first it kind of almost seems like that. What was that movie with like Ricky Gervais? And it was like kind of like this, and it's like independent, sort of like, what if the world was like this? Oh, is The Invention of Lying?
Oh yeah.
And like everyone has to say exactly how they feel because there's no such thing as lying. It's just everybody's like blatantly honest, and that has a lot of this. And it's just, but it's, you know, again, it's given as if it's very normal. It's very dry or whatever.
And see, I think I would have appreciated that if everyone was like this all the time. But some characters are a little more emotive. Like John C. Reilly's character is pretty emotive. And then there's scenes where like something will happen to a character. And like the one scene where the one woman jumps out the window to kill herself. And she obviously doesn't kill herself. And she's just probably paralyzed, but she's bleeding there. There's really long, uncomfortable shot of her crying very intensely. And in the microcosm of itself, it's effective in that shot. But then, like everyone is just kind of talking very matter of factly about it, and it's like, why is she allowed to be that emotive and to cry, like, you know, incredibly emotionally, but everyone else is, you know, kind of stuck in this like dry, like manner of speaking. Like it doesn't really fit when they're next to each other, I don't think.
It doesn't. Because there's a lot of because the screenplay tries to have it both ways. It tries to be like, well, you know, like Colin Farrell's hitting on a woman with like long blonde hair, and he's kind of like, your hair is very beautiful. And she's like, thank you. It's like my, you know, defining trait. And he's like, what do you think of my hair? And she's like, oh, it's dry. And it's like a very matter of fact kind of like whatever kind of thing. And then like you mirror that with like, there's a scene.
Then he says, oh, well, I could get a hair transplant. And she's like, oh, it wouldn't help.
Yeah. And it is just very like, she doesn't, like, some of these things aren't said in like a purposely mean way. It's just like, this is the way we have to talk. And then it's contrasted very noticeably with like maybe like when this is jumping ahead too, but they go into like they basically go into a room and they hold like a gun to like a guy's head, and it was like, and he basically makes up a lie, and it's just kind of like, again, like the woman crying in pain. It's like, and characters who are lying to get ahead. It's kind of like it doesn't fit this world.
You can't
almost
have both. And then even more so with just the dry delivery, like there's a storyline eventually where David, that's his name, right? David.
I'm not sure. I'm just going to call him Colin Farrell.
I think his name is David. But he kind of catches, a woman catches his eye. I think they literally just call her the Heartless Woman.
Right.
but she's got like short hair, and he says he likes that, but she is very, very emotionless. So like he's fantasizing about like things he would say to her, and he says like, oh well, if I catch a man during the hunt, that's something we'll explain later. I'll say that I hope he dies a slow and painful death to her. Like that's like his way of like flirting with her, because that's how like emotionless she is. And then he ends up saying that when the woman falls out of the window or jumps out of the window, because the emotionless or heartless woman is looking, and David walks up to her and is like, oh, I hope she dies a slow and painful death. Actually, I hope she dies very quickly, because the screaming is very annoying. And he's saying it like with this incredibly dry delivery, because he's trying to like hit on her, and that's kind of the way that she speaks as well about a lot of stuff. And it's kind of like him trying to fake the way that he is to get with her, because he's obviously not really a heartless, emotionless person. He's just trying to fake that defining feature so that they can be allowed to mate, so he doesn't get turned into an animal. But then after he's done with her, and I think he literally tranquilizes her at one point. They get into an argument. After he's done with her, he's still the same way, and all the other characters are too. So it's like you can't have a character whose defining feature is like this, detachedness, and then have all the other characters be that way for comedy too. Because I think it is mostly for comedy's sake, because they're saying a lot of times the comedy works, like the line about, do you want to be listed as a heterosexual or homosexual, or like when they're talking just matter of factly about like there's a thing where every morning a maid comes into your room if you're a man and makes you take your pants off and basically like dry humps you, like, emotionlessly, and then doesn't let you finish, just so that you'll be able to get, more erect if you do like meet a mate or something. Like it's basically just like sexual practice, so that dating will go smoother for you and so you can perform. And like to have like scenes like that when they're like explaining that, like, oh, you got erect very quickly this morning, David, like with the dry tone, like that's funnier. But then like they also have that same tone in the serious parts. They have the same tone for all different characters. So yeah, it's like you said, you can't have it both ways. And it would be funny if like one of the two of the characters were like that, and then the rest were just normal people allowed to like express themselves. But really you only have like John C. Reilly is the only character that is allowed to express himself in any way.
Right. And and I would even like to talk about the interesting sort of characters that he meets, because I do like John C. Reilly's character. Like right from the first day, he meets two other men, or even like this place is strange. I feel like that's a better jumping off point. The manager comes in as soon as he checks into his room, and I love this scene so much, not only just because Olivia Colman, who's from like the Peep Show, she's also has a big part in Hot Fuzz. She's the hotel manager, and she's just like a lot of that humor. Again, I just really like the matter of fact. Like she plays the matter of fact very well. Like she's just saying like, these are things that are true. I'm sorry. Like it's unfortunate that you will be turned into an animal, but you can't take it this hard and everything. But what I mostly love about that scene is the way that the director, again, already forgot his name. Doesn't matter.
Lanthimos.
Yeah. But, he does this a lot more in Dogtooth, and this is really the only scene that I can pick out from this one. But the way that he'll frame a scene, there's a more better term for that. Oh, the composition. Because she comes in, she explains herself. She kind of has like the two like butlers there that help run the hotel, or bellhops, or whatever they are in this weird dystopian society. And then she also goes, I'm the manager and this is my partner. And it's just a man who's like, his entire like above his shoulders is just cut off by the frame. You never see him again. It's just like, this is my partner, like kind of thing. Yeah. And it's just very like, okay, like there's no reason to introduce him. And
well, I guess, I mean, because the entire movie is kind of about like this in your face, like, these people are dating and these people are single. Like everyone there is reminded how much of, they're single and that's undesirable. Like there's the one scene where they're practicing target practice for like the tranquilizer. I think it's in the trailer as well.
Right.
And one of the guys teaching the Ben Whishaw character is like, notice how the target is a single person and not a couple.
You're right. Yes.
So I think that was just her way and the movie's way of being like, she's in a relationship. She's not like the other people here.
Right.
So in that way, she's kind of to be respected and,
oh, definitely
not to be related to by the single people there.
Right. I don't know. Just something about that makes it sort of just dreamlike almost. Like you remember that there is somebody there, but you can't put a distinct sort of characteristic to them, which again, that's how the
That's also a funny scene because that's
And-
where he picks his animal. He says the lobster, and he lists a bunch of reasons. That's obviously where the movie gets his name. And she's like, "That's a very good choice. A lot of people pick dogs. That's why there are so many dogs in the world.
Right.
Lobster is a rare animal. Not many people pick rare animals. That's why there's so few of them." Like she just has that whole matter of fact way of speaking, and like kind of explaining like this movie's view of why certain animals are more popular in the world and more populated than other animals. I thought that was a funny scene.
Oh, definitely. Another, and again, he definitely has, more than the trailer leads on, he has like his reasons for being a lobster. He says they're blue-blooded like aristocrats, and he also says he loves the water. They live to 100 years old. But my favorite is when he's repeating that to John C. Reilly and the other friend that he's made, and John C. Reilly's like, "Oh, I'd love to be like a parrot." And there's other dialogue said, but he's like, "Wait, why don't we all become parrots and we could just hang out, guys?" And like that's like one of the most like realist moments of like, I don't know. There's just something.
Yeah, like it doesn't have to be lonely after this,
right? Because
but then the Ben Whishaw character is immediately like, "You guys are idiots." Like no one I forget what he says about a lobster. He has some or about a parrot.
They'll boil you alive. Yeah.
Well, that's what he says about the lobster. He has some criticism about the parrot.
He says,
too.
"I can't believe like you'd want to be the only talking animal when you're like a man with a lisp."
Oh yeah, that's right. He's
Like,
like,
that's
you're gonna have a
ridiculous.
lisp. People are going to laugh at you.
Yeah.
And we're back.
We certainly are.
We
24
are back.
hours later.
Oh boy. So there's a little bit of goof here. We were recording last night, and about halfway through the recording, at the point you're starting at now, pretty much, my GarageBand stopped recording. Didn't see the notification until we were completely done with the episode. So we're coming back now to finish the last half of it. We just want to let you know, just in case we do actually repeat anything that was said already, that's because we're recording twice for the same episode. So
Wait,
that's what happened there.
Your what stopped? You had a garage band playing?
Yes. I had a band in my garage playing.
Was Dave Grohl there?
We hit the noise curfew and we're like, stop.
And he's like,
There's
"Hey,
kids in the
man,
neighborhood. I know this is real music and I'm glad it's not a computer, but stop.
You can't make music without a garage, man." Dave Grohl. Yeah, but
There's 4 instruments in a classic rock band: guitar, bass, drums, and garage.
But yeah. Sorry, I cut in with that joke and totally lost train of everything we were talking
So
about.
we're
but-
reviewing The Lobster.
What was that?
We're
Sorry.
reviewing The Lobster.
Oh boy.
If I remember correctly, when it cut
after
off.
30 episode curse.
Oh god, yeah, they're all gonna be like this. Sorry, guys.
Oh boy.
If I remember correctly, when it cut off, we were talking about, or I was about to start talking about the scene where the Ben Whishaw character,
Right.
he notices that there's a girl that has a nosebleed, or that's like her defining feature. She gets nosebleeds. And then he sees her at the swimming pool one day, and he is so taken by her that he actually goes about faking getting nosebleeds so that they can share that defining feature.
Right.
By when she's not looking, he'll like slam his head against whatever hard surface is there. So in that scene, it's against the hard concrete of the pool, or just against a desk or whatever. And he continues to just do that for the rest of the relationship, and it's just like a pointing to how ridiculous like the whole defining feature thing is in this like world that they've built for us.
It is.
I mean, it's almost like it ends up kind of working as like a weird like almost like a metaphor for dating, or like a satire of dating and like relationships in the dating world, and like the perception of what it's like to be single. It just, even in that aspect, like it almost works as like a satire of like online dating too, like how
Right.
you get matched by like the features that you share, or rather like the interest that you share. But then even like other aspects of the world too, like the way that like singles are looked at and like outlawed and looked down upon. Like there's a scene later on in the movie when Colin Farrell's character travels to the city and he gets stopped by police officers and they're looking for his certificate of partnership. Like that's almost like when like your family members ask you like, are you dating anybody, or when are you gonna go settle down? And then there's like a weird part where like if you're in a relationship with someone, if the relationship is in trouble at all, they just give you a child to repair the relationship. And that's like a satire of like how couples can like sometimes get pregnant if a marriage is failing. And then like other stuff like how like the one woman like kills herself just to get out of like this hotel. That's almost like a metaphor for like killing yourself to, out of loneliness and just trying to get out of that situation. So there's definitely a lot of metaphor, I think, there. But then sometimes it's kind of harder to follow as a metaphor, and it almost seems like it's just like a coincidental commentary on the whole situation. Like the whole weird element how they like go out and hunt the loners in the wild and like tranquilize them. Like I couldn't really find a correlation there. Or like they talk about turning into animals like it's a real thing. Like it's not like something they talk about like vaguely, where you could like kind of make like a connection to something. Like it's just a real part of that world that people turn into animals. So that's when it's more just a real just absurdist film as opposed to a satire or a metaphor.
Oh, definitely. And I think what's it called? I went on a rant right about now.
We're just trying to remember all the stuff we said last time.
Yeah, I don't know. I was way too into my hilarious garage band joke, but did you mention that we actually talk? I mean, we may have not recorded an entire episode, but we did an entire episode.
Yeah, we talked.
And then at the end, Mike was like, "Oh, I don't think I've been recording." So we have talked the end of this episode out, but I believe I talked about something. I think it was one of the most sort of glaring errors, and I believe we've already talked about the sort of confusing how everybody talks very blatantly, very honestly, but then there's also this weird kind of like they can also be dishonest and sort of manipulative and everything.
Yeah.
But this was another
like with the nosebleed thing. Like that's like, because even that character, the Ben Whishaw character, is very blatant and like just forthright, and like when he's introducing the John C. Reilly character, he's like, "Oh, this is such and such," and he has a lisp. Like, just almost like to the point of it almost being like Asperger's or like almost on the spectrum.
Right. Yeah. No.
The way a lot of the characters talk. But then he is completely able to maintain an entire relationship based on a lie of whether he gets nosebleeds or not.
Right.
So those are kind of in stark contrast.
And just because this movie sort of moves past the nosebleed girl, but one of the things that bothered me about this film was these matching traits. And again, it's like a very understood thing within their society. It is literally the bedrock of how dating goes. And like in that way, I couldn't really grasp that metaphor really. Like you can have common interest, but it's not like I don't know where I was going with that, but with that in particular. But we start off the film, and it's just Colin Farrell, and he's asking his wife like, "Oh, he's short-sighted, isn't he? And does he wear
glasses or contacts
or glasses?" And she tells him. And it's just like, they were dating, or they were married because they were both short-sighted. And then the director and the cinematographer very carefully construct this relationship with Colin and the nosebleed girl. And you become very invested too. You know, there's just the way he'll look at her, the way she's shot. The first night he's there's like a formal sort of dance, and he asks her to dance, like that's like his first choice, and she's like, yeah, sure, and she bleeds on him, and it's kind of from her nose, she bleeds on his shirt, and it's kind of charming. It's kind of like quirky. It's something that you can get into as like an independent sort of rom-com, which this is marketed as. Then
yeah, and like it's especially coming from his relationship with his ex-wife, where it was like you said, like based on that short-sightedness, they're definitely leading you to believe like that maybe he's going to break the mold, and
exactly
she has a different feature, but he doesn't care,
right?
Because they have some sort of like genuine connection outside of this like absurdist reality that they're in.
Right, and then again, yeah, and they're really building this girl, or maybe it's just me, but then yeah, there is. The other scene I wanted to talk about is they're in like sort of a swimming area, an indoor swimming area of the hotel, and she's doing a backstroke, and Colin Farrell's obviously looking at her, and the way that she's doing the backstroke is, she's in like a bikini, and I'm sure like the assigned bikini that everybody has, and she's doing a backstroke, and like her breasts are sort of above the water, and she's kind of like just kind of fluttering above the water. And I think I said this last night, and I don't know what it has to do. The director is gay, but he knows what he's doing, kind of thing. Like,
yeah.
How could he possibly imagine what an attractive woman looks like if he's gay? But he also
what?
It's like the Home Improvement opening. But he also does this in Dogtooth as well, where he makes you sexually attracted to somebody. So now here you are, you're sexually attracted to, you as a viewer, to Nosebleed Girl. Colin Farrell is obviously...
Yeah, we're faking nosebleeds now. And
you're like jabbing yourself in the nose with a penknife. And then all of a sudden, yes, and he has his friend with the limp approaches her, and they even play with your emotions in that way, because he has this like chummy approach where he's like, oh, what's your favorite stroke? And my friends say I'm very good at the breaststroke or something. And it's kind of like, ugh. And then he goes even further, and he fakes like the sort of nosebleed thing, and all of that, what have you. But it's literally what Mike just said. I thought, because we live in this dystopian future where there is these rules about you can only fall in love with somebody who, matches that distinctive characteristic, I thought he was going to break it. And even after...
We talked about this last night, but yeah, there's another opportunity later in the movie when he meets Rachel Weisz's character, the narrator for the first half of the movie.
Right.
And they obviously start developing a relationship together. I think it starts out because I don't know if we got into this in the first half of the podcast yet, but eventually he leaves the hotel because he develops this relationship with a woman who is like heartless and emotionless, and that doesn't work out. They have a fight. He has to tranquilize her, and he knows he's going to be, punished for that, so he just flees into the wild, and there's this group called the Loners, who they're not allowed to be in relationships with each other, and not allowed to flirt, they're not allowed to have sex with each other, and they kind of just live in the wild and try to escape the hotel guests when they come out to hunt them. And they're living in the nature and whatever, and there's a few times where they'll go to the leader of the Loners' parents' house, and when they're there, the parents don't know what she actually does, so they have to pretend like they're all in relationships, because obviously it's still looked down upon to be single. So Colin Farrell and the Rachel Weisz character end up having to fake being in a relationship, but then it also starts to become real for them, and they develop a relationship, and lo and behold, he finds out that she is short-sighted as well. She just wears contacts, not glasses.
Right.
So then he's even more attracted to her, and they develop a relationship, and long story short, towards the end of the film, I think she keeps a journal, and the leader finds out that she's planning to run away with Colin Farrell's character. So she does this weird thing where she plans an eye appointment for her to, help her eyesight, but she ends up actually just blinding her altogether for planning to run away. And that's where, as like a viewer, you're kind of thinking like, oh, okay, well, this is kind of like the part where Colin Farrell's character will be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter. Like, I care about you.
Right.
Like,
these traits don't
outside
matter.
of the confines of this society that's like obviously been oppressing us in this way. Just this depressing, absurdist reality where we all have to share some defining feature in order to fall in love. But it's like the opposite thing. And like he starts like starting to lose feelings for her a little bit.
Right.
And then he develops a plan where they're going to escape basically and go to the city, and he's going to blind himself, like, so they can be together.
Right.
And like that just we talked about this last night, but it's just kind of like a disappointing ending overall, because it's happy in the end, but I think the film leads you to believe that it's going to go in a different direction, and it's not really necessarily a surprise here as much as it's just like a disappointment. Like
it is, yeah. And I definitely want to talk more at length about the ending, but there are so many just details about this woman with the bloody nose, to the point where after he meets the woman that he ends up with, the Rachel Weisz's character, they go to, fuck with the couples at this hotel just as a part of the weird cult that they have out in the woods.
They call it like the missions. So
Right.
it's like something they regularly do is just go back to the hotel and fuck with people who have found relationships.
But he strays from the mission that they're on, and he goes to the yacht, which is the final stage of basically dating at the hotel before they release you as a couple.
He requests specifically to go on the yacht.
Oh,
'cause
okay.
The leader assigns him a different job in the mission, and he's like, oh, can I go on the yacht? And she's like, oh, okay, yeah, well, you do the yacht and we'll do this one.
But
So like he
goes
really,
in
really
there.
wanted to go do this. It wasn't just a coincidence either.
He goes in there, and it's like their final stage before they're released as a couple, and it's his friend with the limp and the girl with the nosebleed. And this is after he's met the woman that like he loves kind of and ends up with, and he goes like, I hope you know, like, he's faking this whole nosebleed thing, and he kind of just he does this whole thing. And it looks very out of jealousy. It's kind of bizarre, and at that point I thought maybe there's still hope with this nosebleed girl. And the other note, again, to kind of zigzag back to where Mike was talking about, or maybe even just to wrap up this whole point, because it's not going as smoothly as I did it last night. But the film begins with his wife, who's also short-sighted, leaving him, and then at the end of the movie, he ends up with a woman who is short-sighted. Yeah. And it's just kind of like, we didn't go anywhere. And it's kind of, I can imagine the feeling that you have like when you're done like watching Anomalisa. It's kind of like, what did we really even take from this?
It's just like a cycle, and it's like they had an opportunity to kind of like destroy or break down like this society that they built up, and come away with like a bigger overall message, like love is bigger than shared features or something like that. But the message they kind of come away with at the end is just like, it sucks to be single, and sometimes it works out. And
I guess what just annoyed me was that it wasn't even just like a straight story like that, but it flirted with this idea that it might be more meaningful, and I think that's what made me a little upset.
And I think the more I look at it, or try to look at it through the lens of it being like a metaphor for love in the dating world, I appreciate some of those things. Like if you look at the scene where he goes back onto the boat and tries to break that relationship up, like I look at that as like, you can be in a relationship with someone that you love very dearly,
right? But
there's still always like those past flings that like kind of come back to like plague your mind, and you're like, oh, what if? And he kind of like flirts with the idea of maybe trying to pursue that again, but then in the end he just goes back to the women that he's actually with. And I think that was sort of supposed to serve as like a metaphor for that, and
right,
trying to sabotage someone else's relationship because you're not entirely happy with yours,
right,
or stuff like that.
Right.
And then I guess the ending really is more just him Like I think maybe her getting blinded is supposed to be a metaphor for just the way, the honeymoon period kind of comes to an end in a relationship, and
Yeah.
you have to find like new things to connect on. So, rather than them connecting on being short-sighted, they're connecting on, being blind. And it's something that he had to, in the metaphor way of speaking, learn to love, and
Right. Yeah.
so, I mean, when I look at it that way, I appreciate it more, but I still do agree that and we talked about this last night, like I wish they would have like not gotten together at the end, and especially because the movie is called The Lobster, like I kind of wish he would have been turned into a lobster at the end, and like there could have been like some bigger message, about how you don't actually have to find someone, and it's okay to be alone, and being single doesn't suck that much if like you can learn to love yourself. And they could have done that with just like a scene of him, becoming a lobster. Well, not like transforming into a lobster like Animorphs, but
Right. Yeah.
a scene of him as the lobster, like, just on the ocean floor. And like, that would have been enough to be like, oh, okay, like he looks kind of happy. And I think I would have appreciated a risk like that more than what seems like the safer kind of ending, which is weird to say because it's him blinding himself, or we're kind of led to believe that.
You just kind of would have been like Tobias, you spent more than 2 hours in the morph.
Tobias, you're talking in our heads.
Sorry.
Why are you talking between brackets?
But just to reel us back a little bit, he does get. I mean, I think we can definitely transition from the hotel first half of the movie to the woods second half of the movie, and another thing I was saying last night was I was watching this movie with Sabri, and I paused it at some point when they're out in the woods, and I said, like, like if this was like an American film, like there would be like that trope of like the hotel manager would be like, she would have like a whole like B plot line, and she would be like, we need to go find Tim, like we can't let Moore escape or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
But
Or even if it was like a Wes Anderson movie or something,
yeah.
like that would be the comedic plot line, is like the SWAT group that she assembles.
Oh, yeah,
to
yeah,
go
definitely.
find them in the wild.
And then again, there's so many loners out there, and Colin Farrell has such like what a like lucky way of escaping. I was like, how do so many people get out there, kind of thing?
Yeah, his is very coincidental. And
Right, definitely, yeah. Where I don't even think he wants to escape as much as he just wants to get revenge on this woman, or he wants to like have a say in the story. I don't know. I just don't see him escaping. I don't even think that was part of like his plan really, as much as it was like.
yeah, I think he's kind of playing it by ear. I mean, 'cause
Right,
he's the one that faked being emotionless to be
Right.
with the heartless woman. So it's not like he's trying to get out of that relationship until she's about to turn him in, and it's kind of just like a fight or flight type scenario where he doesn't want to get turned in.
But we do go to, the second half does take place in the woods, and I feel like a common consensus just between like viewers and like critics, I feel like people were more just disinterested in the second half of the film within the woods. And to touch on something again that I feel like we've touched on almost every single episode since the Civil War episode, maybe the Avengers Civil War, or Captain America Civil War, with the Avengers in it. But there's a tremendous tonal shift from the hotel to outside, and it's very sort of off-putting in a way where it's kind of funny when you're inside the hotel, and then you go out into the woods and it's a little more dire, even though he's kind of saved from being turned into an animal. And
well, yeah, because I mean, in the hotel, like the satire is really heavy, especially because it's all like the little like bureaucratic like intricacies, which I really loved. Like, and I think that's the more effective part of the film, is when it's kind of making fun of bureaucracy and like all like the little, the paperwork you have to fill out to do every little thing, the rules there are for everything. Like in the hotel, like you can't masturbate. And like if you do, there's this great scene where they catch John C. Reilly after he had apparently masturbated, and they confront him, and they just put like a toaster on the table, and there's like all these people standing around the table, and the shot is great because it cuts off and you can't see their heads, and you can only see Riley as they're talking to him, and he's like denying everything, and then to punish him, obviously they stick his hand inside the toaster while it's on and like burn it and just like hold it there. And that's just the punishment for masturbation there. Yet in the morning, if you're a man, like there's these maids that will come into your room, and there's one scene even where like Colin Farrell is like, can we not do it this morning? It's really unpleasant. And they tell her that they have to do it. And basically you get on the bed, you take your pants off, and the maids pull down their pantyhose and they dry hump you, and until you're about to climax, but they don't let you finish. And they do that every morning as like a way of like sexual practice, and to like make sure you're ready for, you know, when you do actually find a partner in the hotel to have intercourse with. But masturbation isn't allowed. And,
right.
you know, the matching uniforms and just like all the weird rituals that they have there. So that stuff is super interesting compared to when they go out to the wild, and it's a little bit harder to follow the metaphors out there. And it's just a little weirder out in the wild, and definitely more serious.
Definitely. And what else was I going to say? Oh, I don't know. I feel like it just feels like two different screenplays almost, or two different movies in a way. Not just because of the steep the steep tonal shift. I also feel like the whole sort of plot line with him and Rachel Weisz is sort of cut short. And I feel like I don't really build up as many feelings for her as I did for the nosebleed girl. And I feel like they don't really get to build that much of a relationship, where if he sort of like left her at the end, I wouldn't like I'd be like, oh yeah, and like shit happens. And it also feels like the love is very forced in this society, like again where they go onto the yacht, and it seems like these people who are making it to the last step and are about to be released as couples, you know, like, oh, the guy with the limp is faking the nosebleeds, and the other guy that they hold like a gun to his head and said like, you were her, and he's like, her, like I can survive on my own kind of thing. And it's kind of like nobody's really actually in love kind of thing. So I kind of wouldn't, I don't know. And I guess that does bring...
it would have been nicer if, you know, even if the message was that, you know, everybody else is faking it in the world, but these two people aren't. And they sort of get that with like what he's willing to do for her. Mm-hmm. Like I don't think any of the other characters, well, I guess the one guy is breaking his nose all the time, so that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
But that's out of deception, whereas this is out of, I want to be, you know, the same as you are, and you know, willing to blind yourself is definitely very extreme.
And I don't.
So I guess maybe that's their way of showing that it's more pure, but we don't really feel it between the characters because, like we said, the delivery is so dry from everyone that there's no emotion. It's hard to even really give a personality to each different person because they all kind of talk with the same delivery.
Yeah, that's very true.
And then like in the hotel, the scenes with like the nosebleed girl, like they have all those shots where like Colin Farrell is like looking at her and noticing her and just totally infatuated with her. Mm-hmm. We don't really get those in the wild with the Rachel Weisz character.
Yeah.
And like she's not even really given too much of a quirky quality. Like the nosebleed girl, you know, her thing was different from Colin Farrell's, so that was, you know, her thing. It was able to differentiate her.
Yeah, Rachel Weisz's like quirk is that she wears contacts.
Well, and that she likes rabbits and she wants people to bring
that's true,
rabbit meat to eat.
Yeah.
Which is like, I mean, that's interesting, but I guess it's not really as alluring to us as an audience. And we don't have, you know, the benefit of like a shot of Rachel Weisz swimming through the swimming pool in a bikini, you know, to kind of get us on board with, okay, this is the one that he's truly meant to be for.
Right. And I don't think we've talked about this yet, but Rachel Weisz is narrating the whole film, and
yeah, I did actually like that.
It's very unique because again, we don't meet the narrator until, you know, a little well into like the second half when he meets her, and and this kind of I liked it because it did read like a novel, sort of, and there were things that maybe they couldn't have portrayed.
It was almost like a Lemony Snicket novel listening to it. Like the tone of the narration was pretty cool.
Or at least they couldn't have portrayed like at the speed that the beginning went at. Like, it's so... It goes really, really fast at the beginning, and they need a narrator. But then I was also like, I don't know.
I remember reading an interview, though. I think that it wasn't originally supposed to be the Rachel Weisz character.
Okay.
I think they were originally thinking of having it be the maid, but then they thought it would be cool to have this kind of idea where the narrator is talking, and then you meet the narrator. And that's actually who it was. But I think we talked about this last night. It's your point, so I'll give you credit for it. But that whole trope of having Rachel Weisz be the narrator, then at the end, like without the narrator, it would have been kind of vague. Because the last scene is they escape the wild, they go to the city, they're at a diner, and they sit down, and Rachel Weisz is, obviously blind, so she's alone, and Colin Farrell goes to the bathroom with a knife to blind himself, and he kind of looks like he's about to hesitate for a minute, and then he holds the knife up to his eye, and then we cut back to Rachel Weisz, and she's just sitting there alone.
Right, and this is like...
And then the film ends, and without the narration, you could have been like, well, does he actually do it? Because she kind of looks a little somber when she's sitting there at the end. But with the narration, just especially because it's kind of like an omniscient narration, like there's things that she knows about Colin Farrell that she would have to have stayed with him, and it's like a speaking about the past when she narrates too, so it becomes pretty obvious that they do end up together in the end, and it kind of takes away that ambiguity that might have been there without it.
And it was I mean, everything's happening so fast, sort of. Like, I think this all takes place over the course of 2 days, where the woods leader finds the Rachel Weisz's character's diary, and then she reads that they want to go away, and then literally, like, either the next morning or later that day, she takes her to the fake LASIK eye surgery. and what's it called? So she's pretty new to being blind, and I think a point I was making last night was, Colin Farrell has been like leading her through the woods, kind of. I feel like if they kind of lead you to believe that, like, they're playing these games like because she's blind, and then Colin Farrell will sort of be like, all right, that's it for today. Like, maybe let's just like lay down and not talk.
Losing his interest.
And he's sort of he's losing interest in her because she's blind, and I thought, like, maybe this is like at least they were kind of in love. This is the least that he can do for her, is not leave her out in the middle of the woods.
Yeah,
but
lead her into the city.
Kind of like lead her into the city, get her like seated at a diner, and be like, all right, I'm gonna go blind myself. And if he went into the bathroom and was about to do it, and then he like wimped out, she would be none the wiser for several hours. Or, like, if he just left the bathroom, walked right past the table, and walked out the door, because she's very new to being blind. And I thought, like, that ending could have been a kind of nice cliffhanger, in my opinion.
I have to admit, I did actually go back and rewatch the ending, just because I wasn't sure if he had walked by, and because the shot, it's really the same shot from when he's sitting down at the booth too, so it's kind of a somewhat wider shot. Yeah. And then he's gone, so there's space on the left-hand side of the table, and it's wide enough where you can really see out through the window that they're sitting by. Right. And I wasn't sure if he like walked by through the window, so I went back to watch it. I don't think he does.
No, he doesn't. Yeah. Yeah. But because of the narration, you have to assume that they end up together, I think. Yeah. So I don't know. And, like you said before, I would have... The title, The Lobster, is kind of misleading. I would have liked if... I kind of was expecting half the time for him to end up just kind of being caught, or something not working out with Rachel Weisz. And he does get turned into a lobster, and it kind of would have been a more poetic sort of ending.
Yeah, and even if they didn't actually go to a scene of him being the lobster, if they just kept the ending as it was, and just didn't have her be the narrator. Right. If they had the maid or someone else be the narrator, then at the end, the pairing with the title, you would kind of assume, okay, he probably doesn't go back to her, and that's why he's called the Lobster.
Oh God, yeah.
That would
That would
probably,
have,
in my mind, be a little bit of a cooler ending.
That would have been a great. I didn't even think of that.
And it might. I mean, maybe that is what he was thinking, and he didn't realize that making Rachel Weisz the narrator would ruin that potential for that ending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. Yeah. It's
because I mean, the Lobster. It has less meaning if you believe that they're going to stay together forever, because he never will actually become the Lobster, and that's just kind of the animal that he was trying to avoid becoming.
right. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I'm trying to think of what else there. Again, there was some stuff at the end where I feel like the script writing was just like, okay, like kind of thing where right after she blinds, or right before or right after she blinds Rachel Weisz, she also kind of punishes Colin Farrell without him knowing what she knows, and she has him dig a grave, which is not out of the norm. It's something that she's requested him to do several times, because it's something that they do in this outside sort of cult, is that they all dig their own graves.
Mm-hmm.
But she does it very aggressively. She requests him, like she says, you're going to dig your grave and you're going to do it now. And it's the way it's cut builds tension, and it's kind of a cheap thrill because nothing actually really happens. And there's one part where she makes him go in it and then put dirt all over his face, and she's like, you wouldn't want the hounds to get you, would you? And then the next morning he knocks her out with a rock and ties her up and puts her in the grave that he dug, and there's like hounds running back and forth over the grave.
Yeah, and like the hounds aren't particularly like threatening looking. Like they look like they're. I mean, we had talked about how it would probably be hard to get like actual vicious hounds in a scene with an actor, but like they look like they're ready to like just lick her face and that's it. Like they don't look threatening,
cute pups
at all. And like we were saying, like last night, like it would have been more effective to just have her in the grave and not cover her up, because then we still have the knowledge of the scene where she said, oh, you want to cover your face, you don't want like the dogs to like get, pick at your corpse or whatever.
Right.
Like we would have had enough of that knowledge to be like, oh, he didn't cover her, he wants the dogs to like eat at her corpse. Like,
just a subtle sort of callback. I'm just gonna go out of order now. I feel like just picking up on just other things that happened in the screenplay or film around this time. The blinding I thought was weird. It just felt very Greek tragedy-esque to me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have anything else besides the fact that I just didn't like it.
Joe's notes: blinding, Greek tragedy.
Don't like.
No. I guess Greek tragedy is fitting since he is Greek.
He's from ancient Greece.
Yes. He wrestled with boys.
Oh boy. Yeah. But I do.
Notes.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you do.
No, I think if we want to show some fingers, we can show some fingers. If the boys want to show some fingers, let them show some fingers.
Well, I went first last night, so do I go first again, or do you want to go first?
You can go first again, because, again, like I said last night, and then I said before we started recording last night, I said, I feel like this film sort of warrants a short review.
Yeah.
I feel like my final thesis isn't much. Again, I said this last night, but I really just have like 5 lines of notes that I kind of just scribbled while I was driving home. And they're not like I can't read them.
How do you write while driving?
Oh, it's
you have traffic or?
Yeah, I have a lot of traffic on my way home. But it's dangerous. It's another how many fingers don't do it at home. Don't try this at home.
We got to start that disclaimer.
Yeah.
Don't record on GarageBand and don't try this at home.
Don't make music without a fucking garage.
Grohl notes. All right. So overall, I thought the film was beautifully shot. There's a lot of particularly great sequences where they have classical music underneath like slow motion action sequences. Like there's a scene where they take all the single people out into the woods to hunt the loners, and that's all in like slow motion, which is really cool to see. Like, you know, the darts, tranquilizer darts flying past people in slow motion and people tripping and falling. And, you know, and when people do catch someone, them like, you know, beating them and all that is pretty cool in slow motion. There's a scene where Rachel Weisz and Colin Farrell, they develop hand signals to communicate with each other, like really intricate hand signals where like down to specific stuff, like, you know, a hand signal for like, oh, we want to go have sex, or I want to have sex with you now, or I'm thinking about you, or I want to dream about you tonight. Like they have a whole language of hand signals, but when they're learning those hand signals, they have a slow motion sequence. It's really cool. And just a lot of the other shots in the wild, where they have like, you know, other animals there that are presumably people that have turned into animals because they're just strange wild animals that don't really belong in a forest like that. Like there's a peacock that walks by in the background at one point. There's just a random pig. There's a camel. There's a flamingo. And it won't be like a close-up shot on the animals. It'll be a scene where something else is going on and you'll just kind of like barely notice it walking by in the background. So I thought that was really, really cool and unique. And the film in general is just a unique concept with those unique visuals, and the tone is consistently abstract, and it's pretty funny throughout for the most part. But I think my biggest complaint in the end was the dry delivery, because it kind of just seems like a cheap, like less effective imitation of Wes Anderson.
Right.
And in the end, it kind of underutilizes the talents of the actors, because there's some like real powerhouse actors in this, like Colin Farrell, if you've seen some of his other stuff. Rachel Weisz, John C. Reilly, like they're all capable of like, you know, Oscar-nominated performances. And in this, they are all kind of painted with the same brush because of this dry delivery where, you know, their humor is all the same because it's just saying either sexual or violent or weirdly serious things in a, you know, bland and dry tone.
Right.
And it also kind of gets rid of any potential for real drama because no one can really show emotion. And, you know, it is funny in the beginning, but the comedy kind of gets old, you know, hearing people say all this stuff with a dry tone. And I think I would have liked more real drama to occur and, you know, a chance to see these people like really act. And then in the end, I think the overall or the underlying message of the movie is too thin. And I had read a review by Richard Brody, the New Yorker, where he had a similar complaint, and he specifically critiqued the movie for not taking the opportunity to say something about the financial situation in Greece. I don't know if I would necessarily I don't know if I would necessarily go that specific. Well, he was tying it to, I forget, there was a filmmaker from Portugal that he was comparing it to, and how that guy had made a film that was talking about the shitty situation in Portugal. I think it's a little too specific. I don't fault Yorgos for not taking the opportunity to talk about what's going on in this country. Like, especially since it's not specifically a Greek film.
Right.
But I do think that the message, which kind of just ends up being in the end, that it's hard to be single and couples just don't understand. I mean, I guess it's valid, but I think it's too small and basic of a message for this film. And even for like an absurdist film, I think I would have liked it to go deeper and say something more about society rather than kind of just poking fun at society. So I think for those reasons, I'll give it 3.5 fingers out of 5.
What? I didn't know that was going to be your
score. Like you haven't heard this before.
Oh, boy. I don't know if I said this before, but I was also reading, I probably already said this, but I think Colin Farrell sort of had like you can notice like he kind of had like a gut. Like I read that he like gained like 40 pounds for this role.
Really?
Yeah. Which I was kind of like, okay. Like
his character had such little personality that he didn't really need to.
But it's also kind of funny that like I don't know. I feel like the last thing I saw him in was like True Detective season 2, and it's
He had a
kind
gut
of
in that,
like
didn't he?
what?
He had a gut in that, didn't he?
Yeah. I guess he did, but like still, it plays into like what I'm about to say is that like in that like I remember he like goes into like his doctor's office to like be treated like after that like big gunfight or whatever, and he's like Jesus, like Colin Farrell. He's like, he's like, it's okay to have like one bad habit, but like you can't have them all, kind of thing. He's like, your liver's redlining, and like you're obviously doing like drugs, and you just treat yourself like shit, and your diet is poor, and you've been doing this forever. And it's kind of like the way they describe his character on top of that too. And I was like, this guy would not look like Colin Farrell. And it's kind of like in this, like he may have gained 40 pounds, but he kind of is still the most attractive person there by a long shot, and should be
really,
like basically the male version of Nosebleed, where like everybody, like a lot of the women are sort of gunning for him.
Yeah, I mean, all they really do is they give him glasses and a mustache, and he's got kind of a comb over sort of thing going on.
Right, yeah. But again, I don't really have a lot to say. I think the end kind of it did the whole narration thing definitely bugs me. The whole Nosebleed girl, I obsessed over her. I feel like even more than I did last night. Tonight.
Joe really liked that pool shot.
It's not about that. It's about misleading the audience. It's like the film was like the hotel maid that came in and got you arrested.
Didn't let us finish. The Lobster just dry humped us for an hour and a half and didn't let us finish.
You're right. So it did. I mean, it kind of like finished with its, foot half in the door, half out, where it's kind of like the end proved that this terrible dystopian society where they turn single people into animals was kind of right.
Yeah.
like we do fall in love with people with similar traits and like, and all this other thing, but it was like we kind of had to escape the place where they set us up to fall in love. And I think last night I compared it to sort of Trainspotting, where he uses the money that he got with his friends who are drug addicts, but then he goes to start a new life with that. And it's kind of like playing to both sides, but it really doesn't work as well in this movie, in my opinion. Overall, great satire film. I mean, the first half in the hotel is tremendous satire. Yeah. Again, like I said, I feel like I've never seen such like a great like metaphor sort of for like sexual desperation, and they cover that very well. And just again coming back to the hotel, the details of this hotel and like the wacky rules, and like they'll have like assembly shows where like showing like how you will choke to death or you'll be raped.
Oh, those are weird. We didn't talk about those last night.
You'll choke to death if you're by yourself, or you'll be raped if you're like walking by yourself. And they're so awkward because they're like these like almost school assemblies that are put on by the staff of the hotel.
Man with woman in restaurant.
Right, yeah. And I think
woman
I also
by herself walking.
Yeah. And then I think I also talked about, like when he first goes there and the hotel manager comes and explains the entire thing. Again, fantastic performance by Olivia Colman, or I forget exactly what her name is. But then they handcuff, for his first night, his hand behind his back. And at first, it's kind of funny because you don't really know what that's about. And I'm pretty sure you just gradually figure out that it's one of those things where it's like, it's almost like another assembly. Like, look how hard it is to do things with one hand. It's I kind of thought it was like a masturbation thing at first. But yeah, I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, that's almost like a metaphor in and of itself.
Right. Yeah.
Literally tying your hand behind your back, and that's how awkward and hard it is just to, because for the first day that they're there, they have to kind of like, they're trying to find someone right away, but they literally have their hand tied behind their back for the first day.
Yeah, it's quite literal. I guess again, I don't know if I talked about this. I think maybe I tried to get into it earlier, but again, back at that shot where the hotel manager comes and talks to him, and she presents her partner, who the composition of the shot kind of just shows like his shoulders down. And I wish there was more of that. And again, I didn't remember until you were talking about the John C. Reilly scene where they put his hand in the toaster and you can't really see everybody sort of standing up out of the frame. But again, I wish he did more of this, because he does a lot of it in Dogtooth, where he'll just kind of shoot the middle of people. There'll be no heads, no really like knees down. It'll just be like these flailing limbs. And it's blurry and it's light and it kind of seems very dreamlike, and it takes you to another place. And this sort of took me to another place too, but it was a little more grounded. I think it was shot in Dublin. It looks very Dublin, like the city looks very Dublin-esque, and it's kind of very, that's what I was also about to say. I love seeing those animals in sort of like cold, rainy Dublin. Yeah. Like exotic animals. And then I think the final thing that I wanted to touch on was in the first half last night. You were talking about that Bomb magazine article.
Oh, yeah.
I made some poor joke about that. I can't remember what that was. Whatever it was in bad taste, and I'm glad I'm not saying it.
We won't repeat it again.
Yeah. But it does feel like, I'm sure I touched on a here and there, but it does feel very different from the one other film of his that I've seen, because I think it is publicly financed, and I don't know if he's exactly sacrificing any form of creative control. I'm sure he is.
I brought up because I read the quote from the Bomb magazine article earlier, and then there's the paragraph literally right after the quote that I read. He says, so making my first film within an industry with financing and a crew that views what they do as a proper job, who want to finish at a certain time and go home, to whom one film may mean nothing more than the next, that was difficult, or a difficult situation to get into. So it definitely seems like he was kind of maybe having to, it wasn't just a close group knit of friends, making a movie. It was his first kind of real taste of not necessarily a studio film, but definitely a more professional film with, people that he wasn't, able to handpick every single person involved.
Right, exactly. And I'm sure
people, who are just working for a paycheck rather than, the love of the game, as is the case in, some indie films.
Right. And again, Dogtooth seemed very experimental, very sort of natural, but I'm sure it was rehearsed the hell out of, and I'm sure they slept in that house and everything. Like I'm sure Colin Farrell was like, well, I'll see you at 9 tomorrow, like have my coffee kind of like thing. And it's kind of like, and again, I'm sure he was pushed, and I'm sure he was also equally delighted to be like, oh, I have Colin Farrell in my movie and Rachel Weisz sort of, but again, I'm sure he was also pushed towards them to be like, well, people aren't going to pay money to see, like, these Greek stage actors that nobody knows kind of thing.
Yeah. I think he had said a lot of the people were his first choice.
Okay.
But he said that, again, literally right after where I just ended that paragraph, he says, having strong support from the actors was really helpful throughout the process. Their instincts were great. They understood the material, and nobody came in having a completely different idea of what this was supposed to be.
Right.
Not that we ever discussed what it was supposed to be. I mean, you say a few basic things like, this is how I like to work. I don't want to discuss too much about the meanings of things or characters or backgrounds or how you're supposed to do this. Is that okay with you? And then you hope it will work out. So it doesn't sound like they really did a lot of rehearsal for this film. Right. It was a lot of just kind of like, hey, show me what you guys got.
Right.
And apparently that's how he likes to work.
All right. Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting.
But yeah, and I think that's where I'm going to close off my piece about this movie, and I'm going to give it 3 out of 5 fingers.
So, not that I remember the math from last night, but it's going to come out to 3.25 and round down to 3 fingers. Man, I'm good at math.
And I think I'm going to I feel like I kind of took you off guard last night. It was just something I thought of, and again, it's something that I thought of again.
Well, I was more taken off guard because I was just pissed off because the recording had stopped.
Oh, right. Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, no, but like, again, this is something I never thought I'd do, but I just wanted to say that we're definitely putting our thoughts and prayers out there for Anton Yelchin's family and loved ones. It was only literally 2 episodes ago that we really I'd like to think I think I don't know about all of us, but I feel like we raved about his performance in Green Room. And,
I absolutely loved his performance in Green Room.
Right, and we got really excited for sort of performances to come, which really stings to say. And I think it's super unfortunate that his death was so untimely. And again, he was
so young, and he was 27 years old,
age,
like, just a year older than me. Yeah, super unfortunate. I think he has always been a talented actor, but it felt like Green Room was probably where he was starting to like really hit his stride and like
right.
maybe start to, not that he was ever really typecast into like, mainstream roles. He had done like Charlie Bartlett, and I guess he was getting his paychecks from Star Trek mostly.
Right.
It just felt like we were going to have a lot more great roles to come. And I think that's kind of, everyone who's expressed their condolences has kind of echoed that sentiment of, just gone too soon. Like,
oh, definitely.
It seemed like there were so many more great things to come from him. And it's also just unfortunate because like, if you haven't heard, it was kind of a freak car accident that he was killed in. I don't think they're entirely sure of what happened yet, but he was found basically pinned between like a brick mailbox at the bottom of his driveway and his car, and the car was in neutral. There was also, I think, a report where they said that there was a recall for that model of car, but I don't know if they've specifically pinned it to that.
Right.
It could have just been that the car was rolling down the hill and he tried to get behind it to stop it, or he was, down at the hill checking the mail and had forgot that he left it in neutral instead of park, and it, just by the force of gravity rolled down the hill. But either way, like it's just unfortunate because sometimes these celebrities die. I feel like we've lost a lot of celebrities recently.
Oh, definitely. And
it seems like a lot of them have been, and I don't want this to sound like anybody deserves that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But like it's one thing when somebody dies from an overdose or a drug type of thing like that. I think it's even more tragic when it's just like a crazy accident, and it's not even like there's someone else to blame. It's just like the universe giving a big fuck you to certain people. So that's definitely really unfortunate.
It is. And
so our thoughts and prayers go out to Anton Yelchin's family and all of his fans. I think we talked about this last night. He's got a lot of fans, not only from his acting, but he was in a punk band. We mentioned that in Green Room, which they're actually not bad. I listened to a few of their songs. He played guitar for them, and he was pretty good. And I think they had developed a decent indie online following, so I'm sure they're reeling from the loss as well.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not that I wouldn't, it's not that I don't mourn the loss of celebrities. It just, after a while, it kind of becomes this eye roll of like, oh, 2016 is the worst year for celebrity deaths, and it's like, well, is it, or is our like social awareness sort of on a parallel to the like instant gratification technology where we just know more sort of thing?
Yeah.
And but I said last night, I said, like, Prince, Muhammad Ali, I can't think of anybody else at the moment.
David Bowie.
Yeah, David Bowie. But I feel like this one really like made my stomach sink, because it was just, I don't know. It was just, again,
well, he seemed, from what I've read and heard from him, he just seemed like a really genuine person. Like, and not that the other people necessarily weren't, but I think there's something maybe less genuine about people of, the stature of like Muhammad Ali, or like a David Bowie, who has got a very like put together performance. And I don't ever really want to be like comparing deaths in that way. I'm just saying that why this particular death really hit me hard.
Because
he seemed very loved by people and just a very genuine person who was very interested in his craft and just creating.
He was a little more of ours, I feel like. And I feel like going back to the X-Men episode when we were talking about that theme of films, good or bad, but they're playing this important role in your history of in your background of film. You know, the Alpha Dog, like you said before, fucking Charlie Bartlett, and I think I said last night, I closed it off with, like, to prove to you that I'm being sincere about this, I still think he was garbage in Star Trek. But I was really, honestly, looking forward to reviewing more films.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'll, just like with, what's his name? In The Master and...
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah, I feel like they just kept pulling out more and more films. Like, well, he was working on this, and he's in this now.
Yeah.
I think I saw Anton Yelchin's IMDb, and there's still a few, again, maybe finished things that haven't been released yet. So maybe
that would be good to see more from him. I think he's one of those. He became, especially in Green Room, there's certain actors where, like, you see them in that one role, and you fall so in love with it that you're just like anything they do in the future, you're just hooked. Like, anytime their name gets attached to a project, you're like, oh, I will go see that, just because that person is, like, attached to it. And I think he had become that kind of actor for me. Mm-hmm. So then become so fresh off of reviewing it,
right?
Not only 3 episodes ago now at this point. It's just fresh. And also just seeing the way that he was respected by people that he worked with, like Jeremy Saulnier had a couple tweets about him, basically echoing the sentiment of him being gone too soon. And J.J. Abrams wrote a really nice note on Instagram or Twitter that he posted with some kind words about him. So it's just sad.
Yeah.
But sorry to end the episode on such a serious note, but we did want to give our condolences to his family.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess we'll...
Yeah.
No, go on.
I mean, I guess just to reiterate, that... the Lobster, we're going to give it, 3 fingers. Did we already say that? Am I just repeating myself?
I think we did, yeah. 3 fingers.
Right. Yeah. But
we said it many times because we said it last night as well.
I feel like it's Groundhog Day. I'm just like, oh god, I have to review.
We're just stuck reviewing the same episode forever.
We're just giving it different scores.
Well, there's a podcast about that.
Right,
actually,
I was about to say they just watch Grown Ups 2 over and over again. Oh boy.
But anyway, I think we'll sign out now.
All right, great.
So signing out for How Many Fingers the Podcast, I'm Mike.
And I'm Joe.
And rest in peace to Anton Yelchin.